So I want you to picture a 4-year-old child.
Okay.
And this kid is in a really tranquil Montessori classroom. We're talking, pastel colors, wooden blocks, gentle whispers.
Right, a totally peaceful environment.
Exactly, an environment that is entirely engineered for peaceful, self-directed learning.
Sure.
But within 3 hours, literally 180 minutes, this child has instituted a reign of terror so severe, like running around screaming, terrorizing the other children, that the school actually calls his mother.
Wow. In 3 hours.
Yeah, in 3 hours. And they essentially demand she remove him from the premises permanently.
That is pretty intense for a 4-year-old.
Right. Now, I want you to fast forward 30 years. That exact same child is sitting in a glass-paneled boardroom in the City of London, operating at the absolute highest levels of global finance.
And probably using that exact same energy.
Exactly. He is utilizing the exact same thrill-seeking, chaotic energy to manipulate markets right before the 2008 economic collapse.
I mean, that is just a wild trajectory.
It really is. So today, for our deep dive, we are taking you into the mind of someone who operates in these incredibly murky, gray areas of human psychology, places where that kind of absolute chaos isn't punished, but it's actually rewarded with millions of dollars.
Yeah, this is a really fascinating subject.
We are looking at this raw, fascinating, and honestly deeply unsettling YouTube transcript from the channel Andrew Gold Heretics, and it features an interview with Geraint Anderson.
Yeah, Geraint Anderson. That is a name that definitely sends a very specific shiver down the spine of the UK financial world.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he is the original city boy. Before the whole 2008 crash happened, he actually wrote this anonymous column for the London paper.
And he was exposing everything.
Everything. He was exposing the rampant institutionalized greed, the crazy substance abuse, and just the cutthroat machinations of the financial sector totally from the inside.
It's like having a mole inside the biggest casino on Earth.
Exactly. And he eventually revealed his identity, wrote this massive bestseller, and now he's published a new book. It's called How to Con Friends and Manipulate People: The Subtle Art of Being a Total Psychopath.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to know how these elite manipulators operate, how they view the world, and how they exploit entire global systems.
And we also need to talk about how you can spot these tactics in real life.
Exactly. How you listening right now can spot these exact same tactics being used in your own office, in your local politics, or even in your personal life. But before we get into how a partial psychopath manipulates the global economy, we have to look at the manufacturing process.
Right. How is someone like Geraint Anderson actually built?
Yeah, how does that happen? Because his origin story completely shatters all those conventional assumptions we have about dark personality traits.
It really does. I mean, the pop culture narrative usually points to severe childhood trauma, right?
Yeah, poverty, abuse, the classic serial killer profile.
Exactly. But Anderson's background completely upends that whole nurture argument. He was raised in an incredibly loving, stable, and deeply principled family.
I was reading this and I was just shocked. His father was a Labour member of Parliament in the UK. That is a career entirely built on advocating for the working class, social equity, and public service. And his mother was a devout Christian raised by missionaries in Bolivia.
So this is a household where ethics, religion, and public duty were just the oxygen they breathed every day.
And you're telling me none of that ethical programming took hold on him?
It seemingly bounced right off him. Anderson describes himself as a nutter from day one.
Like the Montessori story.
Yeah, that 3-hour expulsion from the school at age 4, that wasn't an isolated tantrum. He says that was his baseline.
That's terrifying.
And this thrill-seeking trajectory, it only escalated as he got older. He was completely devoid of that normal internal governor that most kids develop.
Right, the thing that tells you, hey, this is a bad idea.
Exactly. And by the time he was 11 years old, the behavior became literally life-threatening.
Oh man, the drinks cabinet incident. This part of the source material is staggering.
Yeah, it's pretty dark.
I mean, an 11-year-old doesn't usually just sneak a sip of beer to see what it tastes like.
Yeah.
But Anderson stole a bottle of cherry brandy, a jam jar full of whiskey, and a jam jar full of vodka.
That is a massive amount of alcohol for a child.
It's insane. He hauled all of this liquor to a cemetery in South Kensington and drank until his body completely shut down.
He was hospitalized for 3 days with severe alcohol poisoning.
3 days.
And the source includes this darkly comedic, yet statistically terrifying detail about that whole thing.
Oh yeah, what the nurse said.
Right. When he finally regained consciousness, a nurse walked over to his furious mother and noted that Anderson was actually one of 1,000 children under the age of 13 hospitalized for alcohol abuse in the country at that time.
That statistic is chilling. It just highlights this profound lack of risk assessment. He was constantly chasing the edge, even committing burglaries in his youth.
But here is where the story pivots.
Right, because this is where I start to get a bit confused. If his hardware is this broken, if he has this total disregard for consequences, why doesn't he just end up in the criminal justice system?
Right, you'd expect him to end up in jail.
Yeah, how does a teenage burglar with severe alcohol poisoning end up getting a degree from Cambridge University?
Well, that pivot is really the crux of Anderson's own theory on psychopathy. It all comes down to the interaction between neurological hardware and environmental software.
Okay, break that down for me.
Anderson points out that certain traits are innate. For instance, a misfiring amygdala.
And the amygdala is the emotional processing center, right?
Exactly. It's heavily involved in feeling fear and recognizing fear in others. So if your amygdala isn't firing correctly, your emotional control and your capacity for empathy are severely blunted.
So he is literally born with a faulty fear receptor.
Correct. The hardware dictates the potential for psychopathy,
Yeah.
but the nurture, the environment, that dictates the application.
I see.
If a child with that misfiring amygdala is raised in a violent, abusive environment, the trauma interacts with the lack of empathy, and society gets a violent criminal.
But if that same kid is raised in a loving, highly educated, privileged environment like Anderson's?
You get a socially adjusted psychopath.
Right.
You get someone who learns to channel that coldness and ruthlessness into systems that actually reward those traits.
Like becoming a brilliant surgeon.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
High intelligence combined with a blunted fear response creates an ice-cold surgeon who doesn't panic when a patient starts bleeding out.
Or a relentless litigator.
Or, in this case, a top-tier stockbroker who can manipulate millions of dollars in a market without losing a single second of sleep.
So the raw material is the same, but the operating system installed by the parents determines the career path.
Precisely.
So he gets the Cambridge degree, which basically proves he has the intellect to mask all his internal chaos. And Anderson actually jokes in the interview that you always know when someone went to Cambridge because they'll tell you within 2 minutes. He says it's like being a vegan or doing ayahuasca.
That's very true.
But even after Cambridge, he doesn't immediately march down to Wall Street or the city. He actively rejects it.
He goes full hippie.
Totally. He grows his hair down to his lower back, gets 3 earrings, a goatee, and moves to Goa, India. He just wants to be a hippie selling trinkets on European beaches.
A life of low stakes, wandering thrills.
Exactly. Until nepotism, the ultimate door opener, forces a change in direction.
Oh yeah, his mother gets involved.
Right. She cajoles his brother, who is already established in finance, to secure Anderson an interview for a stockbroking job.
And his brother assesses him and identifies exactly why he will thrive in that world.
What did he say?
He says Anderson is highly intelligent, possesses superficial charm, and is a, quote, bullshitter of biblical proportions.
I mean, that's quite the resume. The transition here is almost cinematic. He chops off the hair, shaves the goatee, and goes to an Oxfam charity shop.
To buy a suit.
Yes, to buy a pinstripe suit for exactly £6.
It's hilarious.
He is walking into an interview for one of the most high-stakes, lucrative industries on the planet, wearing a discarded £6 suit. It just shows a complete lack of reverence for the institution.
Which, ironically, is the exact flavor of fearless disinhibition the financial institution was looking for.
Right. I loved it.
And the interview itself sets the cultural tone for everything that follows. It doesn't take place in a sterile boardroom.
No, of course not.
He meets this 55-year-old boss. They consume 4 bottles of champagne, and then they relocate the interview to a strip club in Shoreditch called Metropolis.
I want to look at the power dynamic in that club, because it's basically a masterclass in reading a room.
Absolutely.
Anderson is sitting there slightly drunk, and this 55-year-old boss points to a 25-year-old woman working there and asks, "What do you think of that girl over there?"
A total trap of a question.
Total trap. Anderson, trying to play it neutral, says, "Well, she seems a nice girl." And the boss replies, "That's my girlfriend."
And then, just minutes later, the boss puts a gold necklace around her neck right in front of him.
At that precise moment, Anderson realizes what the City of London is actually about.
It is not about complex economic models or capital allocation or helping businesses grow.
No, it is a pure transactional power dynamic built on vice, sex, money, and cocaine.
That's the reality of the environment.
So does an environment like that create psychopathic behavior? Or does it just act as a giant, flashing neon magnet for people who already have those traits?
I'd say it's a symbiotic relationship. The system attracts the psychopaths, and the psychopaths shape the system.
That makes sense. And the specific era Anderson entered, like 1996 to 2008, that was uniquely fertile ground for this behavior.
Yeah, former UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown ironically referred to this exact period as the financial age of responsibility.
The irony there is thick enough to choke on, because the reality on the trading floor was a culture of institutionalized, unmitigated greed.
It really was the Wild West.
Let's break down the actual mechanics of the financial crimes they casually discuss in the source material. I want to start with the pump and dump,
Sure.
because it sounds like a mob movie, but the math behind it is terrifyingly simple.
Yeah, the Thames Water example Anderson provides perfectly illustrates how vulnerability in the market is exploited through sheer deception.
So how does a pump and dump work in practice?
It requires two coordinated elements: false information and leveraged financial instruments.
Walk us through the exact mechanism. How do they actually price a fake rumor into the market?
Okay, so you and your syndicate in the city decide to target a utility company, let's say Thames Water.
Okay, I picked the target.
Before you say a word to anyone, you contact your associates at a hedge fund and instruct them to quietly purchase massive amounts of call options on Thames Water.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, a call option gives you the right to buy a stock at a specific price in the future.
Exactly. So if the stock price skyrockets, the value of those options increases exponentially. It offers massive leverage compared to just buying the stock outright.
So the trap is set. The derivatives are purchased.
Yeah.
Then comes the pump.
Then you start whispering to financial journalists, planting this completely fabricated rumor that a massive German conglomerate is about to acquire Thames Water.
The rumor hits the news cycle. Normal retail investors, like people managing their own retirement accounts, they hear this and think, oh, I need to get in on the acquisition premium.
Right, they don't want to miss out.
They start buying the stock. This influx of buying artificially drives the stock price up. And here is the truly insidious part.
The rising stock price acts as false validation for the initial lie.
Yes, the market sees the price moving and assumes the acquisition rumor must be true. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy built entirely on air.
Once the price reaches a predetermined peak, the dump is executed.
So the insiders who bought the call options sell them off at an exorbitant profit.
Exactly. And shortly after that, the market realizes there is no German buyer. The rumor just evaporates.
And the stock price craters back to its original baseline, meaning every retail investor who bought during the surge loses their capital.
And Anderson freely admits this was rife. He notes that as an analyst, every single stock he covered would inexplicably shoot up by 15% in the days just prior to management officially announcing an acquisition offer.
I mean, that is just mathematical proof that insider trading was the norm, not the exception. But wait, aren't there structural safeguards against this? I've always heard about Chinese walls in banking.
Well, in regulatory theory, a Chinese wall is an impenetrable information barrier within a financial institution.
Right.
The corporate finance department handles mergers and acquisitions, so they possess highly confidential, market-moving insider information.
And they aren't supposed to talk to anyone else.
Right. The research and trading departments who buy and sell stocks, they sit on the other side of the wall. They are legally forbidden from communicating about upcoming deals to prevent insider trading.
But Anderson jokes that these walls had, quote, lots of chinks. So how did they actually bypass a compliance department that records every single phone call?
By simply walking outside.
Seriously?
Yeah. Anderson talks about the Peregrine takeover by Eon. The desk phones on the trading floor were recorded, and the audio was retained for 5 years.
So you can't talk on the desk phone.
Right. So a hedge fund manager would just call Anderson's unrecorded personal mobile phone and casually ask to grab a coffee outside the building.
They just step out onto the pavement, away from the compliance officers, and swap illegal corporate intelligence over a latte.
That's it. They were in the same building, drinking at the same pubs, operating in this exclusive club for middle-class, public school-educated guys, exchanging secrets that guaranteed massive payouts.
Wow. But the deception wasn't just on the trading floor. The entire ecosystem of wealth management was designed around this ghostly, fluid concept of capital.
Yeah, the source introduces a figure known as the rebel accountant.
Right, an anonymous author who exposed the mechanics of shadow banking.
This accountant advised immensely wealthy celebrities on tax evasion strategies, and he utilized this philosophy that money at that level ceases to be a tool for purchasing goods.
Right. Once you already own the Ferrari and the mansion, money loses its utility. It simply becomes a scoring system, a pure status game.
Exactly. If the guy from Goldman Sachs gets a £3 million bonus and you only get two, the market has declared him mathematically superior to you.
It drives them mad with greed. So, how did the rebel accountant exploit this?
He would tell his celebrity clients that to avoid massive tax liabilities, they needed to purchase a £50 million super yacht and register it in a Caribbean tax haven.
But there's a catch.
Yeah, very psychopathic twist, yeah.
Okay.
The tax loophole didn't actually require the physical purchase of a yacht. Holding the funds in an offshore trust would have sufficed.
So why push the yacht?
Because the accountant was secretly receiving a 1% to 3% kickback from the yacht brokers for every sale he facilitated.
Oh my God.
He manipulated his own clients' fear of taxation to line his own pockets, moving their capital into shadow banking structures, Delaware shell companies, and offshore hideaways.
That deep-seated anxiety about money, this fear that the traditional fiat system is fundamentally designed to drain your wealth, is actually perfectly mirrored in a brief sponsor note during the interview.
You're talking about the tally money read.
Yeah. It is a fascinating editorial choice for this specific deep dive. Tally Money is a financial service that converts fiat currency into milligrams of physical gold.
And during that sponsor segment, the founder points out a regulatory reality that actually validates the exact fears Anderson's stories generate.
Yeah, he notes that since 2012, regulations legally permit banks to take a percentage of depositor funds to prop up their own failing balance sheets.
A mechanism known as a bail-in.
Let's take that a step further, because the concept of a bail-in really terrifies people. When you deposit money in a bank, you think it's sitting in a vault with your name on it.
But it's not. In a fractional reserve system, the bank lends that money out to generate yield.
Right. And if the bank's investments collapse, those new regulations mean they don't necessarily have to rely on a government bailout.
No, they can literally rehypothecate or absorb a portion of the unsecured deposits of normal citizens just to balance their books.
It speaks to a massive societal loss of faith. People are slowly realizing that the traditional monetary product fiat currency is inherently designed to lose purchasing power through inflation.
Which basically acts as a hidden tax.
Exactly. Consequently, there is this flight toward hard assets like gold to escape the exact casino capitalism Anderson was helping to run.
And the reason you, the listener, should care about all this insider trading, the shadow banking, the pump and dumps, is perfectly summarized by Anderson.
Yes, this is the kicker.
When hedge funds were artificially inflating stocks, they weren't just extracting money from other wealthy traders.
No.
As Anderson puts it, they were stealing money directly off your granny.
Those were retail pension funds. Normal people's retirements were the collateral damage required to fund the city's bonus pool.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this predatory extraction is exactly how we arrive at the catastrophic macroeconomic fallout of 2008.
Right. And Anderson introduces a crucial economic mechanism here: asymmetrical risk.
We hear the term asymmetrical risk thrown around in venture capital all the time. But how did it function inside a bank leading up to the 2008 crash?
Well, in a standard market, risk and reward are theoretically balanced. If you make a bad investment, you lose your capital.
Right, that's just basic economics.
But the city created products like collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs.
Oh, the notorious CDO?
Yeah. To understand a CDO, imagine a bank taking thousands of individual mortgages, many of them high-risk, subprime loans given to people who couldn't afford them, and bundling them all together into one massive financial instrument.
So they take a bunch of terrible loans, put them in a blender, and somehow the ratings agencies slap a AAA risk-free rating on the resulting smoothie.
Precisely. They slice these bundles into tranches based on risk.
The problem, as Anderson notes, was that these products were mathematically guaranteed to fail unless two impossible conditions were met.
What were they?
Interest rates had to stay incredibly low forever, and property prices could never, ever drop.
Which totally defies the basic gravity of economic history. Boom and bust is a cycle. You cannot eliminate risk, you can only hide it.
Exactly. So if the bankers creating and selling these CDOs knew it was a house of cards, why did they keep building it higher?
Because of the bonus structure. That is the asymmetrical risk.
Right.
If a banker sold millions of dollars worth of CDOs this year, generating massive paper profits for the bank, they were awarded a multi-million-pound cash bonus at the end of the year.
And the next year, they just did it again, taking home another massive bonus.
And when the interest rates eventually rose, the subprime mortgages defaulted, and the entire CDO market imploded 5 years later.
The bankers didn't have to give the bonuses back.
Exactly. The risk was completely disconnected from the reward. If the bet paid off, the banker kept the millions. If the bet destroyed the global economy,
The bankers still kept the millions. They successfully privatized the profits and socialized the massive losses onto the taxpayer.
it is the ultimate manifestation of institutional psychopathy. The system actively rewarded short-term greed and mathematically punished anyone who worried about long-term consequences.
And the fallout from that asymmetry leads directly to the political world we live in today.
Right, because after 2008, the banks were bailed out. The elites faced virtually no criminal accountability.
And according to the source, this created massive structural macroeconomic shifts. They refer to the post-2008 recovery in the transcript as a K-shaped economy, or more accurately, a sideways V-shaped economy.
Break down the mechanics of that K-shape for us. Why didn't everyone recover together?
To save the system, central banks slashed interest rates to near zero and engaged in quantitative easing.
Which essentially means printing money to buy government bonds and prop up financial markets.
Exactly. So if you already owned assets, if you had a stock portfolio, if you owned real estate, the value of those assets skyrocketed because money was incredibly cheap to borrow.
You rode the top arm of the K aggressively upward.
But if you didn't own assets, if you just relied on a standard salary,
You're trapped on the bottom arm of the K. Real wages stagnated, while the cost of housing and living expenses inflated rapidly.
the gap between the asset-owning class and the working class widened into a total chasm.
The rich got vastly richer, not through innovation, but through central bank policy, while the poor got poorer in real terms.
And the sheer injustice of watching the architects of the crash get bailed out while Main Street lost their homes, it destroyed public trust.
Anderson argues that this specific economic betrayal is what paved the way for modern political anger.
Yes, the desperation of the stagnant working class created a massive appetite for extreme solutions.
Leading to the rise of strongman populist leaders who promised to just smash the corrupt system.
So the macroeconomic fallout of the psychopath's playground completely destabilized global political cohesion.
But to truly understand how that systemic collapse was orchestrated, we have to zoom back into the micro level.
Right, because the global economy didn't crash because of an abstract algorithm. It crashed because of individual interpersonal behaviors within those glass boardrooms.
We need to look at the exact interpersonal tactics Anderson used to climb this ladder of institutionalized greed.
The corporate playbook. Anderson wrote out what he calls the 12 treats of a psychopath.
He jokingly calls them treats instead of traits, because in the corporate world, these aren't symptoms to be cured.
No, they are the tools that get you promoted.
We are talking about grandiosity, disinhibition, coldness, lack of empathy, ruthlessness, and the most vital tool in the box, manipulation.
He describes a corporate culture where normal social interactions are completely weaponized. Consider the office Christmas party or the summer mixer.
Right. For a standard employee, this is just a chance to decompress, have a drink, and bond with colleagues.
But for the socially adjusted psychopath, it is a covert intelligence gathering operation.
But wait, isn't everyone doing a bit of networking at a corporate party? Like trying to figure out who is moving up and who is moving down?
Sure, but there is a big difference between networking and predatory reconnaissance.
How so?
Anderson viewed the office as a strict zero-sum game. The annual bonus pool allocated to his department was a fixed number.
Okay.
So if his colleague, let's call him John, received £1 million, that was £1 million mathematically subtracted from Anderson's potential payout.
Wow. Okay. So it's very literal.
Therefore, at the office party, Anderson isn't making friends. He is actively hunting for weaknesses, personal indiscretions, or rumors he can later leverage to diminish John's standing in the eyes of the managing director.
It is entirely predatory. And this manipulation extends upward to how they handle their superiors as well.
Oh, definitely. Anderson freely admits that 6 of his 12 massive, life-changing bonuses were guaranteed through outright theatrical deception.
The fake phone calls are a perfect example of this.
The psychology behind the fake phone call is basically a masterclass in manufacturing leverage.
How did he do it?
As bonus season approached, Anderson would wait until his boss was within earshot, perhaps walking past his desk.
Just casually strolling by.
Yeah. He would then stage a call, usually having his Auntie Marge ring his desk phone.
His anti-Marge. That is
I
hilarious.
know, but he would perform for the boss, acting as though a top-tier headhunter from a rival bank was aggressively trying to poach him.
So he's pretending to turn down this amazing offer.
He would speak loudly, saying things like, "No, no, I can't talk now. The numbers you're suggesting are interesting, but call me back on my mobile later."
He is artificially inflating his own perceived market value. He is planting a seed of panic in his boss's mind.
Exactly. The boss hears this and thinks, Anderson is in play. We have to increase his bonus allocation to retain him.
And he would also leverage genuine crises to maximum effect. If a rival team of analysts defected to another bank, he knew his bosses would be terrified of a mass exodus.
Because it looks terrible to shareholders if everyone is jumping ship.
Right, so Anderson would walk into the managing director's office and casually drop a lie that he was finalizing a deal to move to Morgan Stanley.
He accurately assesses the risk profile of his superiors. He knows they are too vulnerable in that moment to fire him for disloyalty.
So he exploits their institutional fear to extract a massive guaranteed bonus.
And when that bonus actually arrives, the theatrical performance doesn't stop, it just shifts gears.
Yes. Anderson describes a rigid rule you must follow when you are handed your bonus check, regardless of how astronomical the number is.
Tell us the rule.
Let's say you sit down and your boss slides a piece of paper across the mahogany desk that says you are receiving £600,000 for the year.
A normal person would feel a massive rush of relief, smile, and say, wow, thank you so much, this is incredible.
But in the city, displaying gratitude is a fatal error.
Why is that?
It signals to the boss that they have bought you cheaply,
Yeah.
that they could have given you £500,000 and you still would have been happy.
Oh, I see.
Anderson says you literally have to act like the boss just asked you to, quote, eat a pile of shit.
You have to contort your face into a mask of pure insult.
Yeah. You push the paper back and say, are you serious? Look at the commission I brought in this year. This is less than 10% of what I made for this bank. This is an insult to my output.
You have to maintain leverage and make the boss feel like they barely managed to retain you.
You can think of the corporate bonus pool as a ruthless game of musical chairs.
Okay, I like this analogy.
But the psychopath doesn't just push you out of the way to steal a chair. They actively convince the other players that the music is still playing, so they don't even try to sit down, and they convince the person controlling the stereo to give them 2 chairs just in case.
That analogy perfectly captures the multi-layered deception, and they will go to extraordinary lengths to secure that chair.
Anderson references Machiavelli's famous rule.
Yeah.
If you strike at a king, you must kill him.
And in the corporate hierarchy, this translates to succession planning.
Right. If you are going to maneuver politically to take your boss's job, you cannot simply demote them or leave them in another department to plot revenge.
No, you have to ensure they are entirely removed from the company.
Anderson actually tells a story where he maneuvered to take his boss's job during a corporate restructuring.
And he jokes about it.
Yeah, he jokes that by merely getting his boss fired and replacing him, he actually saved the man's life because a true full-blown psychopath would take the ultimate step and literally kill the boss to permanently remove the threat.
Now, he makes sure to clarify that this specific point is parody. He has a baseline moral compass and wasn't actually plotting murder.
Obviously. But it illustrates the uncompromising zero-sum mindset required to ascend.
But here is the paradox that I find absolutely fascinating. Underneath the 6-pound suits, the fake headhunter calls, the sheer, unfiltered arrogance, Anderson was terrified.
Yes, the imposter syndrome.
Exactly. He was leading the second highest ranked analyst team in the entirety of London. He was generating millions in revenue.
And yet he admits he felt deeply persistently insecure his entire career.
He lived through the long-term capital management hedge fund explosion, the Russian bond default, the dot-com crash, 9/11, the Enron scandal.
He constantly thought the entire casino was going to collapse. He thought someone was going to tap him on the shoulder, look at him and say, "We found you out. You're just a hippie dickhead who got lucky."
It is a profound psychological paradox. We normally assume grandiosity is a symptom of extreme self-belief.
Right.
But in the socially adjusted psychopath, grandiosity is often a highly constructed shield against internal paranoia.
That makes so much sense.
They have to project absolute dominance and invulnerability precisely because they fundamentally perceive the environment as hostile, unstable, and ready to expose them.
So their outward arrogance is directly proportional to their internal fear of exposure.
Exactly.
Okay, let's pull the lens way back, because this brings us to a major pivot in our deep dive.
Where does this apply today?
The exact same tactics Anderson used to manipulate a managing director for a £600,000 bonus are no longer confined to the trading floors of the City of London.
No, they have breached containment.
These exact same psychological levers are currently being pulled by politicians, by influencers, and by social media algorithms to manipulate society at large.
The source material spends a significant amount of time analyzing how this psychopathic framework has been mapped onto the modern cultural landscape.
Now, as we get into this cultural analysis, we are going to look at some highly polarized political concepts.
Yes, we need to be very careful here.
Just to be absolutely clear on our framing, we are neutrally reporting and analyzing the structural viewpoints that Anderson and Gold discuss in the source material.
Right, we are looking at how they view the psychology of modern culture rather than endorsing a specific political ideology ourselves.
We are just the messengers. So what is the core cultural shift they identify?
Their objective is to dissect the psychological mechanisms they claim are operating underneath our cultural discourse. The source argues that we are currently undergoing a massive cultural shift where empathy itself is being actively reframed as a weakness.
Anderson specifically cites figures like Elon Musk, noting his comments suggesting that empathy might be the biggest cause of weakness for Western civilization.
He also points to manosphere gurus like Andrew Tate.
Right. These influencers preach a doctrine of asserting fearless dominance, manipulating interpersonal relationships by running hot and cold, and viewing other humans not as equals, but merely as pawns in a self-serving game of power and status.
Anderson characterizes this behavior from certain influencers and politicians as mildly psychopathic.
It is the direct application of the city boy mindset. The ruthless optimization for personal gain at the expense of others applied to human relationships and broad social structures.
And the conversation then turns to the extreme ends of the political spectrum.
Yeah, they draw structural parallels between disparate movements. They suggest that when ideologies like wokeism, communism, and fascism reach their absolute extremes, they begin to mechanically mimic one another.
This is often called the horseshoe theory of politics.
Break that down. What's the argument there?
Their argument is that extreme movements, regardless of their foundational beliefs, inevitably rely on similar architectures of control.
They institute arbitrary sets of rules that must be strictly obeyed.
Right, and they operate on a deep, pervasive fear of cancellation, public shaming, or punishment.
And they ultimately gravitate toward authoritarianism to enforce their worldview.
They describe a modern cultural environment where people are terrified of saying the wrong thing, constantly walking on eggshells.
Anderson uses a really fascinating, obscure historical analogy here, comparing modern social media outrage to the St. Vitus dance of the Middle Ages.
The St. Vitus dance, that was a phenomenon of mass psychogenic illness.
Like a literal dancing plague.
Yeah, choreomania. Entire crowds of people across Europe would suddenly start dancing uncontrollably in the streets, sometimes for days or weeks on end, until they collapsed from exhaustion.
It was a contagious, performative hysteria driven by intense societal stress.
Anderson suggests that in 20 years, historians will look back on our current era of cultural polarization, social media pile-ons, and cancel culture as a modern digital equivalent of the St. Vitus dance.
A contagious performative panic, where people are compelled to participate in the outrage simply because everyone else is doing it.
And the mechanics of this performative panic are rooted in status games. The source breaks down how people engage in moral posturing to elevate themselves.
They discuss virtue signaling, the act of loudly proclaiming your moral goodness to gain social currency.
Right. If you don't have financial capital or institutional power like a banker does, you use your morality as your currency to assert dominance over others.
But consider this.
Eh?
Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah.
They discuss the backlash to virtue signaling, which is this really brilliant concept called vice signaling.
Vice signaling is arguably even more insidious.
How so?
It is when people deliberately champion abrasive antisocial behavior or intentionally use highly offensive language, specifically to trigger the opposing side.
So someone might use a derogatory slur, not necessarily because of deep-seated hatred, but simply to, own the libs.
Exactly. It is a calculated rebellion against the prevailing moral orthodoxy.
It's the exact same status game, just played in reverse. Both sides are defining themselves not by a coherent set of internal principles, but by how effectively they can out-posture, out-shame, or infuriate their perceived opponents.
And according to the source, this weaponized posturing is creating a massive demographic rift, particularly along gender lines.
Yeah, they point out that in America and the UK, Polling shows young men are trending heavily toward the political right, toward movements like Mag-Ye, while young women are trending heavily toward the political left.
Anderson speculates that some of the appeal of right-wing populism for young men might be a reactionary desire to return to a patriarchal structure.
A pushback against the empowerment of women who are asserting strong, independent opinions.
And to see where this extreme polarization leads, they look at South Korea as the ultimate warning sign.
The political divide between young men and young women in South Korea is described as an unbridgeable chasm.
The men are drifting toward extreme right-wing anti-feminism, and the women are adopting extreme left-wing separatism.
And the mechanical result of that societal failure, a total collapse of social cohesion, resulting in a catastrophic fertility rate of 0.8.
They suggest that South Korea is effectively a dying society because the genders have become so politically polarized they can no longer even coexist, let alone build families and a future.
It is a bleak, empirical extrapolation of what happens when empathy fails on a societal level.
And the source reserves a special level of critique for the sheer hypocrisy of the elite tech class who are actively facilitating and profiting from this polarization.
The Silicon Valley tech giants, this part of the transcript is infuriating.
It really highlights the double standard.
These are the engineers and billionaires who have rocket-propelled our societal manipulation. They design the social media algorithms and the infinite scroll interfaces that fry our attention spans.
They reward extreme outrage, and they basically drive the mass hysteria.
Yet, what do they do with their own children?
Oh, this is the best part. They send them to screen-free forest school.
Right. They force their nannies to sign ironclad contracts, forbidding them from showing their kids a smartphone or a tablet.
They send their children to exclusive schools where they learn by playing with twigs in the dirt, completely isolated from the digital casino their parents built.
They know exactly how damaging the algorithmic product is. They know it breeds psychopathic behavior, destroys attention, and ruins the ability to look someone in the eye.
So they protect their own bloodline while eagerly feeding the poison to the rest of the world for profit.
This brings us to the most crucial psychological distinction in the entire source material.
Yes, this is key.
If we truly want to understand how these elites, whether they are tech billionaires designing algorithms, politicians drumming up outrage, or stockbrokers manipulating markets actually control us, we have to understand the fundamental difference between cognitive empathy and effective empathy.
Here is where it gets really interesting. Because when we say someone lacks empathy, our default assumption is that they just don't understand people.
Right, that they are totally blind to human emotion.
Yeah.
But that's wrong, isn't it?
It is a dangerous misconception. Effective empathy is what most of us think of when we hear the word.
That's the feeling part.
Right. It is the ability to physically and emotionally catch the contagion of what someone else is feeling. If you see someone weeping, you feel a pang of sadness.
If you hear a tragic story, your heart physically aches.
Anderson, and psychopaths in general, severely lack effective empathy. They are emotionally insulated.
Wait, so they don't catch the feeling, but they still excel at cognitive empathy.
Exactly. Cognitive empathy is the purely intellectual ability to understand what someone else is thinking, wanting, or fearing, without actually feeling it yourself.
So it is not an emotional connection. It is a data gathering tool.
It's like having a high-tech radar system that perfectly detects everyone's deepest insecurities, hopes, and fears, but having absolutely no emotional response to the blips on the screen.
True manipulation isn't about ignoring people. It's about deeply clinically understanding them so you can offer them exactly what they crave or threaten exactly what they fear.
Anderson points out that this is precisely what effective populist politicians do.
They scan the electorate using cognitive empathy, figure out that demographic group A is terrified of demographic group B, and then they stand at a podium and say, I despise group B as much as you do, and I am the only one who can protect you from them.
They utilize cognitive empathy to gather the psychological data and utter ruthlessness to execute the manipulation.
Which provides a really natural bridge into the final and perhaps most chilling segment of our deep dive.
Yeah, because the source material doesn't just discuss cognitive empathy in abstract theory.
No, it demonstrates it live in the actual interaction between the host, Andrew Gold, and the guest, Geraint Anderson.
The meta interview.
This blew my mind as I was reading the transcript. Toward the end of the interview, Gold decides to test Anderson's skills.
He essentially says, okay, you're a self-admitted partial psychopath. You read people for a living. What is my weakness? Read me right now.
It's an incredibly dangerous game to play with an elite manipulator. He's essentially inviting him to locate his psychological jugular.
And Anderson doesn't hesitate for a second.
He looks at Gold and states, based purely on their brief encounter, that Gold's core weakness is that he is, quote, slightly intellectually insecure.
Think about the rapid-fire cognitive empathy required to make that assessment so quickly and accurately.
Scary.
Anderson has analyzed Gold's conversational style, his need for verbal validation, perhaps his self-admitted lack of extensive reading on certain economic topics, and he zeroes in on a fundamental vulnerability.
Gold immediately tries to deploy a defense mechanism. He points out that his entire brand, his status game among his peers, is built on being self-deprecating.
He says he intentionally plays down his intellect to demonstrate how secure he is, proving that he can laugh at himself.
But Anderson instantly deconstructs that defense. He points out that self-deprecation is just a more sophisticated form of manipulation.
As the old adage goes, modesty is the greatest conceit.
By constantly being self-deprecating, Gold is essentially projecting the message, I am so incredibly secure and brilliant that I can afford to mock myself for your amusement.
Anderson identifies it as just another status game. It's a circuitous route to the exact same goal of self-aggrandizement.
And then Gold asks the ultimate question. He says, okay, if intellectual insecurity is my weakness, how would you manipulate me?
And Anderson lays out the trap with terrifying precision.
He tells Gold exactly the mechanism he would use to exploit that specific void.
Anderson says, I would big you up. I'd blow smoke up your ass. I'd tell you that you're a really smart guy, an impressive mofo.
He says he would use relentless flattery. He would tell him that because he is so smart, he should have Anderson on his podcast 25 more times, because a truly smart guy recognizes a genius like him.
You should publicize my book to everyone you know, because that's what a clever guy like you would do.
It is breathtakingly efficient.
The psychopath identifies the void, the intellectual insecurity, and immediately fills it with highly targeted flattery, conditioning the victim to perform exactly the actions the psychopath desires.
Just in exchange for a continued drip feed of that specific validation.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Yeah. What is your tell? What deep-seated insecurity are the manipulators in your life currently using to pull your strings?
Whether it's a toxic boss leveraging your fear of financial ruin to extract unpaid overtime, a politician exploiting your cultural anxieties to secure your vote,
Or an influencer feeding your desperate need for belonging just to sell you a course? What is the void they are filling?
this raises an important question. How do we actually defend ourselves against individuals or systems that possess weaponized cognitive empathy, but entirely lack the effective empathy to care if they destroy us in the process?
Well, Anderson himself offers a vital clue earlier in the interview.
He argues that the only defense is to remain rigorously anchored in evidence-based opinions.
When you encounter a claim, especially a highly inflammatory one, designed to trigger an emotional response on social media, you must stop and ask a series of clinical questions.
From whom is this information coming? To whom is it directed?
For what specific purpose? And what is the actual verifiable evidence?
We have to stop reacting emotionally and start acting analytically.
We have to shine a light on our own internal status games. If we know deep down that we are desperate to look virtuous or intellectually superior or physically tough, we can recognize when someone or some algorithm is artificially flattering that specific desire just to use us as a pawn.
Knowledge of your own vulnerabilities is the only viable armor against someone whose entire skill set is dedicated to finding the invisible cracks in your psychology.
Okay, let's bring this all together. We have been on quite an intense journey today.
We really have.
We started by examining a 4-year-old tearing apart a peaceful Montessori school, watched him steal cherry brandy and nearly die of alcohol poisoning, and then followed him as he put on a 6-pound charity shop suit and bullshitted his way into highest echelons of global finance.
We saw how the exact neurological traits that create a delinquent on the street, ruthlessness, grandiosity, extreme disinhibition, are the very traits actively rewarded and monetized by elite capitalism.
We explored how the systemic greed of the 2008 crash, built on the mechanics of asymmetrical risk and CDOs, destroyed public trust.
It hollowed out the working class and gave rise to the political extremism we see today.
We looked at the 12 traits of the corporate psychopath, from fake phone calls to Machiavellian succession planning.
We explored the weaponization of cognitive empathy in our culture wars and the extreme hypocrisy of tech elites hiding their children from their own algorithms.
And finally, we watched a live surgical demonstration of how a master manipulator reads a room and exploits a host's insecurity in real time.
The goal of this deep dive wasn't to leave you deeply cynical or to make you paranoid that every colleague or friend is secretly plotting against you.
Not at all. The goal is to make you well-informed, to give you the psychological X-ray vision required to see clearly through the murky waters of modern manipulation.
Because if you can see the strings being pulled, they can no longer control you.
But as we close, analyzing this source material does leave us contemplating a rather profound structural issue with the way we have chosen to organize our modern society.
It really does.
Yes. And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your week.
Something that builds on everything we've unpacked today.
Exactly. We see that our corporate hierarchies, our social media algorithms, and increasingly our political systems actively filter for psychopathic traits.
They financially and socially reward those who can detach emotionally, those who can manipulate ruthlessly.
And they often systematically punish those who are constrained by genuine empathy or desire for the communal good.
So if this is the evolutionary pressure of our modern institutions,
Are we inadvertently, day by day, evolving toward a future where effective empathy is entirely bred out of leadership?
it's a dark thought.
And if we create a world ruled exclusively by those who only understand our pain as a data point to be exploited, who is going to be left to build systems that actually protect the rest of us? Think about that the next time someone offers you exactly what you want to hear.